Hi everyone, I'm Shelly and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. I'm back with another video and today's topic is Donald Trump the Antichrist? I decided to do this video today because this is something that you might have heard going around with everything that has been happening in the news, and I wanted to come to this topic from a standpoint of not only biblicality, is that a word, but also coming from a standpoint of reason. Because unfortunately, when it comes to this topic, you don't see much reason. You see emotion. You see generational provincialism, which is the idea that no prophecy is the real thing unless it's happening in your generation. And this standpoint is also coming from what can be known as either newspaper exegesis or newspaper eschatology, where you are taking your eschatology or your end times views from the local headlines or the things that you're seeing in the news instead of actually going directly to the Bible for it. So today, that's what I want to do. I want to go to the Bible for this view on the Antichrist, because there have been so many people throughout history that have been accused of being the Antichrist. One of them is this guy here with the little mustache that I'm not going to say, or else my video will probably get taken down. Mussolini, right here, this is old propaganda. Mussolini, is he the Antichrist? So he was accused of it. Elon Musk, I've recently heard people saying that he's the Antichrist. Benjamin Netanyahu, he has also been accused of being the Antichrist recently. I showed you this one on Donald Trump. And then there is Obama. Obama is still being accused of being the Antichrist. And actually, when he became president, was that in 2008? I remember that I was going to a ladies' Bible study at one of my old churches that the pastor's wife actually held. And I remember her talking at this Bible study about how Obama's name meant lightning from the heights of heaven. And so she was saying that Obama is the Antichrist because she was referring to the verse where Jesus said, "And I saw Satan come down as lightning from the heights of heaven." So that was happening even then, that people were saying that. And, I've heard some other people say things like, well, these people can't be the Antichrist, though, because not everybody likes them. And not, the Antichrist is going to be loved by all. Well, that's not really in the Bible. Many people get that idea from the Left Behind series from Nikolai Carpathia, I think was the name of the Antichrist in that series. So that is Left Behind eschatology. That notion is not biblical eschatology. So I didn't know how to approach this, but I found this Antichrist timeline explained. And it was just recent, the complete Antichrist timeline, prophecy explained. And so they go over the Antichrist timeline. And interestingly, the name of the website is mademanministries.com, and I actually thought that it said manmadeministries.com, and honestly, that might be a better name when you see what this timeline explains. So let's go over this. So the first thing on the timeline is that there is the emergence of many antichrists. And then it says, in the early stages, many individuals will claim to be against Christ or will deny his coming in the flesh. These are referred to as antichrists. And that is certainly the case. And what many people do not realize is that the word Antichrist is not found in the book of Revelation a single time. So many people equate the Antichrist with Revelation, but guess what? He's not in there. At least the word Antichrist is not in the book of Revelation. It is only to be found in 1st and 2nd John, which interestingly, John was obviously written by the same author of Revelation. John wrote Revelation, yet the word Antichrist is not found in Revelation. But so many people conflate the Antichrists that, and yeah, I said plural Antichrists, that John mentions in his letters here to the sea beast in Revelation. But I think that's a correlation that people just make. There's no biblical reason to correlate the two of them. But let's look first of all at 1 John 2:18. Children, it is the last hour, and as you have heard that Antichrist is coming, so now many Antichrists have come. Therefore we know that it is the last hour. So here's my question to you. When did John write this letter? Now, you might not know the exact year that the letter was written, but I'm sure you have a guess. If you would guess that it was written in the 1st century, you would be correct. John wrote in the 1st century that many antichrists had already come then. And then he said, therefore we know that it is the last hour. John, the disciple John, the author also of Revelation, said that the last hour was in the 1st century. Let's go next to 2 John 1:7. For many deceivers have gone out into the world, those who do not confess the coming of Jesus Christ in the flesh. Such a one is the deceiver and the Antichrist. So right here in this verse, John gives the definition of what he means by Antichrist. And he says that an Antichrist is someone who denies Jesus Christ in the flesh, that he came in the flesh to die for our sins. And he says that anyone who denies that is a deceiver and the Antichrist. So this whole sensationalistic Nikolai Carpathia, Donald Trump, Barack Obama Antichrist actually cannot be found if you strictly use the word Antichrist in the Bible. All right, so number 2, the final Antichrist. Now I'm going to point out right from the get-go, there is not a single passage in the Bible that speaks anything about a final Antichrist. This is something that has been just kind of written into the Bible, but there are no verses about the final Antichrist, okay? But I'm going to continue on. The final Antichrist will rise to power during a time of economic and political turmoil. He will be a charismatic leader who will gain global influence through deceit and false promises of peace and prosperity. And then they give Revelation 13 verses 1 to 18 for that. And again, I'm just going to point out, word Antichrist, you're not going to find that in here. Also, what you're going to notice, hopefully, if you read the Left Behind series at least, that this description of the Antichrist comes straight out of the book of, well, the Left Behind series. This description, charismatic leader, global influence through deceit and false promises of peace and prosperity, that's Left Behind eschatology. That's not biblical eschatology. There's not even an Antichrist in Revelation, but we'll just continue because I'm going to show you where else this goes wrong. And that is when it comes to referring to the word global. So let's just read, I'm going to read verses 1 down to 10 for now. And I saw a beast rising out of the sea with 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 diadems on its horns and blasphemous names on its heads. And the beast that I saw was like a leopard. Its feet were like a bear's, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth. And to it the dragon gave his power and his throne and great authority. One of its heads seemed to have a mortal wound, but its mortal wound was healed, and the whole earth marveled as they followed the beast. And they worshipped the dragon, for he had given his authority to the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like the beast, and who can fight against it? So it's just stopping right there. So in verses 1 through 4, the author of the website that I was referring to, and many, many, many other people, is equating the Antichrist with the sea beast. And in fact, I remember, I'm going to bring up the Left Behind series again. Nikolai Carpathia, who was the Antichrist in that series, he was wounded in the head, came back to life. So that series also equated the Antichrist, which again, they're only mentioned in the first and second. There were many, and they were already there in the first century. And they equated the Antichrist with the sea beast. But I don't see any reason contextually to compare the two. John certainly never used Antichrist in Revelation. Okay, verse 5. And the beast was given a mouth uttering haughty and blasphemous words, and it was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to utter blasphemies against God, blaspheming his name and his dwelling, that is, those who dwell in heaven. Also, it was allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them, and authority was given it over every tribe and people and language and nation, and all who dwell on earth will worship it. And that's where the global idea comes in. We'll get back to that. Everyone whose name has not been written from the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who was slain. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is to be taken captive, to captivity he goes. If anyone is to be slain with the sword must he be slain. Here is a call for the endurance and faith of the saints. All right, time to go back to here. And all who dwell on earth will worship it. Everyone whose name has not been written from the foundation of the book of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who was slain. So you're probably thinking, well, what's the problem with that? It says all who dwell on the earth. Of course it's global. Well, you see, we'll call it the planet Earth has only had that name for the past 1,000 years. So it was not even called Earth at the time of this writing. So you're probably thinking, okay, well, they had a different word in there. And they did. If we go to the Greek, it wasn't actually a different word. It was the Greek word, gay. Okay? The Greek word gay means soil. It can mean land. And then it says, or the solid part or the whole of the terrene globe. Interestingly, though, I don't think that the people who wrote Strong's Concordance took into account the fact that the earth was not called the earth when John wrote this. So specifically, if you even go to Strong's Concordance, and there are many translators who agree that this is actually gay, is actually better translated as land. So, and specifically, this was talking about the land of Israel. So it means soil, it means land, it means ground. So if we take this into context, and authority was given it over every tribe and people and language and nation, and all who dwell on the land will worship it. Because one thing that many people do not understand is that the book of Revelation was about the judgment of Jerusalem, the first century judgment of Jerusalem. Okay? And don't take my word for it. Look into it. But I just, I feel the need to go over that with you because it's very important that you understand that. And actually, this beast was given a mouth uttering haughty and blasphemous words and was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. You may not know much about the Jewish-Roman War, but the Jewish-Roman War, which was when the temple was destroyed in 70 AD, okay, it culminated in the destruction of the temple in AD 70. That Jewish-Roman War, up until that time, was 42 months. It was 3.5 years. It was 1,260 days. Hopefully, if you've studied the book of Revelation, those numbers sound familiar to you because they are repeated over and over and over again, and that is the exact number of years or months or days, depending on which one you're going by, that lead up to the destruction of the temple from the time that the Jewish-Roman War began in 66 AD. Next is number 3, the mark of the beast. The Antichrist will establish a global economic system where people will need a mark or a number to buy and sell. And we'll read that in a minute. That's Revelation 13, 16 to 18. This mark is often associated with the number 666, or it's actually 666, People always say 666, as I just did, but it's actually 666, and it's symbolizing rebellion against God. So if we go to Revelation 13 and read verses 16 to 18, it tells us, "Also it causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is the name of the beast or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let the one who is understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. And before I continue on with that thought, I'm going to jump back here because I want to point out to you that it says, it's talking about the second beast then that rose up out of the earth. It exercises all the authority of the first beast in its presence and makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose mortal wound was healed." So this is another one of those passages where people are reading it from a modern perspective, and they're saying, oh, well, everyone on the earth is going to worship the first beast. Again, the word is better translated as land or soil, because I'm going to say it again because I know some people need repetition. Earth was not even called earth at the time that this was written. So that cannot be the meaning of the word gay in this case, because that's not even what they called the world then. So going back down here, so many people take the mark on the right hand or the forehead to be some kind of physical mark. Like, there are so many things that people are now throwing out there that they claim to be a possible mark. You know, social security cards or social security numbers at one point were thought to be the mark. Credit cards were thought to be the mark. Food stamps were thought to be the mark. Vaccines were thought to be the marks. Specifically, the one in 2020, the one that had the stuff called luciferase in it. Everyone's like, oh, that's it. That's the mark. They thought that was it. Or they thought the passports that went with them were the mark. Some people think that it's a barcode. Some people think that it's a tattoo. These chips that you know, like some people are having inserted in their hand. I think it was over in Europe, that had to do with their bank account or something. And then now we have this digital ID that they want them to do in the UK, and they're saying, oh, that's the mark. But let's actually go to the Bible, not newspaper headlines, to get a better idea of what this mark may be. Deuteronomy 6, verses 6 to 9. "And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates." In this passage, God is telling those whose allegiance is to him, who have placed their faith in him, that they are to bind. And he does not mean physically, but he means that they should keep these things in their minds. Okay. And let's also keep in mind, now here he says, you shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. So the old covenant was about works and faith. So the hand would have been the works, and between your eyes or the forehead, that's where your mind is. So that would be the faith aspect of it. So if we go back to Revelation 13, knowing that those who place their faith in God would put his commandments in their mind and in the things that they do, that is what this meant too. That those who worshiped the beast would show their worship, would show their allegiance in who they believed in, who they gave their allegiance to, and what they did by the works of their hands. I don't believe that it was a physical mark. I believe that there may have been things that were signs of this physical mark of the mark, but at this point in time, no, I believe that this is exactly what Deuteronomy is talking about, except instead of these people placing their faith in God, they have placed their faith in. And then you'll say, oh, but wait, it says that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark. Well, we see a lot of similar things like this around the world today, don't we? For example, if we see Christian bakers who refuse to make cakes for those who are getting married for those who are going to proceed to a gay marriage, they will not make a cake for them. And so what happens then? Well, society, they will boycott. Many of them will boycott those bakers, and they face economic damage because of the decision that they made. And I'm certainly not saying that they made the wrong decision, but what I am saying is that their decisions, because they are not going with the greater society, is going to have repercussions. So you can bet that those people during this time period who were not worshiping the beast, which many people think was Nero or the Roman government. There are different theories on this, but you can bet that they would have been suffering economically if they were not placing faith, allegiance into what is known as the sea beast. And then it says here, the number of a man, which the word for man can also mean mankind, and his number is 666. And many people will point out that the name Nero, if you calculate that, could also add up to 666. Actually, I was reading something today. I think it was a book by Samuel Dawson, and he was just saying that you could finagle that number system to mean that, and to have any name meaning 666, to be quite honest. But many people believe that it is Nero that this 666 is referring to. Other people believe that this is referring to an Old Testament reference to Solomon and the requirements that he was placing on the people in his kingdom, because that also involved the number 666. But the fact of the matter is that, in my opinion, and I'm going to show you reason for this was not referring to a 2,000 year down the line mark of the beast. This was referring to something that John was writing to these 7 churches to warn them about something that was coming soon. And I mean, repeatedly in Revelation, I'll be sharing those with you, it said that it was going to be happening soon. The time was near. So we need to kind of brush off the excitement that we might get and thinking that these things are happening right now. And we need to get back to what the word actually says. Number 4, rebuilding the temple. This is something that people are also talking about all the time now. They're getting ready to build the 3rd temple. And here is my question. Where does the Bible say that they are going to build a 3rd temple? Interestingly, this article has references that we're going to read, and you will find that none of them talk about rebuilding a temple. But anyway, let's just see what it says. Halfway through his reign, the Antichrist will rebuild the Jewish temple in Jerusalem and set up an image of himself there, demanding worship. And it has Daniel 9:27 as the first reference. So I'm actually going to go to verse 26. Then after the 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off and will have nothing. Then the people of the prince who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end will come like a flood, and until the end there will be war. Desolations have been decreed. And he will confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. But in the middle of the week he will put an end to sacrifice and offering. And on the wing of the temple will come the abomination that causes desolation, until the decreed destruction is poured out upon him. Where do you see anything about another temple being built in this passage? Remember, there was already a temple at the time that this was written. It may have also been written at the time that the second temple was being built, but regardless, whether it was in the process of being built at this time or was already standing at the time that this was written, This does not make any reference to a future temple. This is clearly referring to the temple that was already there. There is no reference to a rebuilt temple. Let's go to the next one that is used for this. Forces from him shall appear and profane the temple and fortress, and shall take away the regular burnt offering, and they shall set up the abomination that makes desolate. Okay. Where does it say that they're going to rebuild the temple? It doesn't say that. Again, it is clear that it is talking about the temple that was already there when this was written. Next reference. And from the time that the regular burnt offering is taken away and the abomination that makes desolate is set up, there shall be 1290 days. Okay. But again, I have to point out, there's nothing here about a temple being rebuilt in the end times. There is not a single verse in the entire Bible that speaks of a third temple being built. Not one. Now I came back to Daniel 9:27 because I also wanted to make another point while I'm here. This is often where the verse that many people will use to talk about the Antichrist making a peace treaty in the Middle East. And and he shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week, and for half the week he shall put an end to sacrifice and offering, and on the wing of abominations shall come one who makes desolate, until the decreed end is poured out on the desolator. There are many, many people who believe, scholars who believe, that this is actually referring to Jesus. Because, where does it say? Let's go to verse 26. It says, then after the 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off and will have nothing. Then the people of the prince who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. If this was a God-decreed judgment on Jerusalem, who would be the people of the prince who is to come who would destroy the city and the sanctuary? It would be those that God was using to do his bidding, wouldn't it? Just as it happened in the Old Testament when Yahweh would use nations in judgment of other nations. This is the same thing. And this is what many scholars are saying. This is actually not referring to an Antichrist or the Antichrist, as many people are trying to say, but that this is actually talking about Jesus. Because it says, he shall put an end to sacrifice and offering. Well, the temple was destroyed in AD 70. That put an end to that. And on the wing of abominations shall come one who makes desolate. That would have been the Roman army who was working in God's plan. Okay, now I'm not saying that's why they were doing it, but God can, he can do what he wants. And they were the ones who came in. They were the ones who made Jerusalem desolate. And it says until the decreed end is poured out on the desolator. So, now I have not done a whole lot of research into this point of view, but I just wanted to throw this out there that it is a valid thought that this is actually talking about Jesus. Specifically, Jesus at his coming. And interestingly, it's the word parousia that is translated as coming, but it is actually better translated as presence. So, at Jesus's presence. And I think that there is a huge difference between coming and presence, but the Bible translators, most of them seem to favor coming. But anyway, I just wanted to share that too. Okay, number 5. The abomination of desolation. The Antichrist will desecrate the temple, setting up an image of himself and demanding worship, which is seen as the abomination of desolation. And the first reference that's given is Matthew 24:15. So this is what Jesus said during the Olivet Discourse. He said, so when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. Okay, so there's that reference. The other references are ones that we already read. So it was Daniel 11:31. And I'm just looking again. Forces from him shall appear and profane the temple and fortress, and shall take away the regular burnt offering, and they shall set up the abomination that makes desolate. And from the time that the regular burnt offering is taken away, I'll just finish reading it for those of you who are just listening. I'm just trying to figure something out. And the abomination that makes desolate is set up. There shall be 1290 days. Okay. So the reason that I was trying to read through those again, because it says here that it gives these references and says that the Antichrist, who is not mentioned in any of these passages, is going to set up an image of himself and demand worship. And I don't see anything about an image being set up there. But I could just be nitpicking, but I think it's important. Another thing that is very interesting is that, yes, this author did include Matthew 24:15, but interestingly did not include Luke 21. And I'm going to share verses 20 and 21. But when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, you will know that her desolation is near. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let those in the city get out, and let those in the country stay out of the city. Well, Luke was written to Gentiles. So Matthew was written to Jewish Christians who would have understood what Daniel said about the abomination of desolation. Luke was writing to Gentiles, however. And so he kind of spelled out to them what the abomination of desolation is. And he said, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, you will know that her desolation is near. Okay? So that's when the desolation is coming, is when Jerusalem is surrounded by armies. And then you're probably still thinking, but no, it's a worldwide thing. No, it was a judgment of Jerusalem. And here's another clue to that. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. If this was a worldwide judgment, how could you flee it? How could you go to the mountains and flee it? And it specifically says, let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Interestingly, I don't know again if you know much about the Jewish-Roman War. The Roman armies did surround Jerusalem. They were there for just a little bit of time and for some reason pulled back, but that was enough. The Christians who were in Jerusalem at the time, who remembered what Jesus said about fleeing the city when it was surrounded by armies, once those soldiers drew back for whatever reason that they did, the Christians fled to a place in Perea called Pella. According to record, no Christians died in the destruction of Jerusalem. Why? Because they listened to Jesus and they fled the city when they saw the army surrounding it. When was this? In 66 AD. Number 6, we're getting there. The Great Tribulation. After setting up the abomination of desolation, a period of intense persecution and tribulation will begin for those who refuse to worship the Antichrist. Again, Antichrist is not in Revelation. And it goes to Revelation 13:7. This is actually also spoken about in Daniel 12, where the time that is like worse than any ever before, same words that Jesus used in the Olivet Discourse. That was talking about the Great Tribulation. So let's go to Revelation 13:7. I don't remember where I have that one. I have so many Revelations pulled up here. Okay, so we'll start with 7, but we're also going to read verse 8. Then the beast was permitted to wage war against the saints and to conquer them, and it was given authority over every tribe and people and tongue and nation, and all who dwell on the land will worship the beast, all whose names have not been written from the foundation of the world in the book of life, belonging to the Lamb who was slain. Now, as I mentioned before, Jesus spoke about the Great Tribulation in the Olivet Discourse. And do you know that he said that no one knows the day or the hour when this would happen, but he did give a time indicator on this. In Matthew 24:34, I encourage you, go to Matthew, start with reading, I'd say even Matthew like 21, but especially Matthew 23. Keep reading through Matthew 25. I mean, keep reading even longer if you want to. And you will see exactly everything that Jesus spoke of. The Great Tribulation is one of these things. And what did he say? And he actually said that right before he said this. Not directly before, but just a few verses ahead of time. Truly, I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. So he was giving them a time text. He was telling them that he may not know the day or the hour, but it was going to happen before the generation that they were in at the time passed away. How long is a biblical generation? 40 years. That you can find in the book of Numbers, which I don't have pulled up, but you can look that up. So the book of Numbers tells us that a generation is 40 years. Jesus said this in about 30 AD. When did the temple fall? When was the temple destroyed? In 70 AD. The tribulation was the Jewish-Roman War, in my opinion, and it happened in the 1st century, just like Jesus said that it would. And for those of you who are going to come in and saying this didn't mean his contemporary generation, it means a future generation, he didn't say, I tell you that generation will not pass away. And the whole time that he is talking about it, even the verse ahead of time, he said to his disciples, so when you see all these things, you will know that he is near right at the door. He didn't say, so when they see all these things, they will know. No, Jesus was speaking to his disciples. He was warning them about what was going to happen in their generation. And every single time that Jesus used the word generation throughout the New Testament, it always meant the contemporary generation that he was in. It never meant race, as many people try to say. When Peter used a different word for race, which was genos, that means race, but the word here used, the Greek word is genea. He was speaking to his contemporary generation, and we have the evidence that this happened. He said this around 30 AD, and the temple was destroyed in AD 70. And what did the Olivet Discourse start out talking about? His disciples asked him, what will be the sign of... let's go to Matthew 24:1. Because the disciples were asking him for the sign, or how they would know that these things were about to happen. So let's go to... I usually go to ESV. Jesus left the temple and was going away. So right before this, he was in the temple giving the 7 woes to the scribes and Pharisees, telling them that on their generation was going to come all the blood of all the people, all the murdered prophets and saints. But then he leaves the temple, and then as they leave the temple, the disciples, they came to point out to him the buildings of the temple, but he answered them, you see all these, do you not? Truly I say to you, there will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down. And then his disciples said to him, tell us, when will these things be, and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? So they're asking, when is all this going to happen, what you're talking about, that this temple's going to be destroyed? Interestingly, the Romans, when the temple was destroyed, they actually dug it up. It was their custom to do this. Whenever they would pillage somewhere, they would dig up the foundations. Not one stone was left upon another. Okay, so that is what started this entire conversation in the Olivet Discourse, is that his disciples, he was talking about the destruction of the temple. And then they asked him, when is this going to happen? What will be a sign? And then that is when he said, truly I tell you, this generation will not pass away until these things have happened. And it did. Just as Jesus said it would happen, it happened. We need to glorify God because he does what he says he's going to do when he says that he will do it. So again, this idea that we're going to be going through a great tribulation today, no, that happened in the 1st century. I encourage you to look up Josephus. He has eyewitness accounts of what happened during the destruction of Jerusalem and the wars of the Jews. It was a horrendous time period that most people know nothing about. We're not taught about it. They don't teach it in school. They don't teach it in church. It happened. You can find eyewitness accounts from Josephus, who was a Jewish historian. And for me, it sealed the deal. The deal was already sealed for me, but that was it for me once I read that. Okay. Now, number 7, the return of Christ. The Antichrist's reign will end with the return of Christ, who will defeat the Antichrist and cast him into the lake of fire. And then it gives Revelation 19, verse 20. Okay. And the beast was captured, and with it the false prophet, who in its presence had done the signs by which he deceived those who had received the mark of the beast, and those who worshipped its image. These 2 were thrown alive into the lake of fire that burns with sulfur. It does not say Antichrist. It says the beast and the false prophet. And in my opinion, the lake of fire that burns with sulfur was the judgment of Jerusalem. And then number 8, judgment and eternity. The Antichrist, along with the false prophet who supports him, will be judged and thrown into the lake of fire where they will suffer eternal punishment. That's Revelation 20, verse 10. And the devil who had deceived them was thrown into the lake of fire and sulfur where the beast and the false prophet were, and they will be tormented day and night forever and ever. There's no mention of an Antichrist. Again, they're equating the Antichrist with the beast. But again, I think there is substantial evidence to show that this happened in the 1st century. So you might be saying, why? Why do you keep saying that? Well, let's look at Revelation 1:1. The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show to his servants the things that must soon take place. He made it known by sending his angel to his servant John. The things that must soon take place. Now, I know that some of you are going to say, well, no, it doesn't actually mean soon. It means quickly. Okay, well, then let's go down to Revelation 1, verse 3. Blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of this prophecy, and blessed are those who hear and obey what is written in it, because the time is near. Soon and near are synonyms. So I think that it's very clear that soon means soon. Not what we want it to mean. It means soon. Now, there are so many different time texts that are giving true imminence, not the definition of imminence you'll get from many people nowadays, but true imminence, true nearness throughout the book of Revelation. But I'll just share this one here in Revelation 22:12, when Jesus said, "Behold, I am coming soon, bringing my recompense with me to repay each one for what he has done." This is Jesus saying that he is coming soon. Would he give false hope? What is that proverb about hope deferred? I'm going to look it up. Proverbs 13:12. Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a desire fulfilled is a tree of life. Do you think that God is in the business of, making people's hearts sick by giving them hope that is not going to happen for them? These people, they were being persecuted so tremendously in that time period. And the book of Revelation, including, even Paul's letter to the Thessalonians, these people who were going through so much were being told again and again and again, Jesus is coming soon. You are the people who are doing this to you. They are going to pay for what they have done. They are going to get their judgment. Here is Jesus saying, I am coming soon. Hope deferred makes the heart sick. Are we going to trust that Jesus came soon like he said he would? And then there might be those of you who say, but no, that's not what he really means, because his time is not our time. God lives outside of time. Well, I encourage you to read Ezekiel 12, verses 22 to 28. I don't have it pulled up right now, but write it down. Ezekiel 12, 22 to 28. It will show you that God takes timing statements very seriously, especially in prophecies. And let's go to Daniel to give an example. Daniel 12:4. But you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. So Daniel was given this prophecy about the 70 weeks, and he was told to shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. So what was the time of the end? He wasn't supposed to keep this book unsealed. He was supposed to keep it shut up until the time of the end. Well, how much longer was the time of the end? The time of the end was when Jesus in his incarnation. Hebrews 9:26, for then he would have had to suffer repeatedly since the foundation of the world. But as it is, he has appeared once for all at the end of the ages to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. That was the end. So, how long was it that Daniel was told to seal up this prophecy? It was about 600 years from the time that this was written until the time of the end was about 600 years. Okay, so there was no reason for the people then to have it, because it was something that was going to happen later on down the line. But in Revelation 22:10, it says, "And he said to me, do not seal up the words of the prophecy of this book, for the time is near." So my friends, I want to ask you something. If 600 years was far enough away for Daniel to seal up those words, and if John was told not to seal the words of this prophecy of Revelation because the time is near, does it make sense that 2,000 years and counting would still be counted as near when 600 years was not? That's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one down below. And if you like my work and would like to become a channel member, I will leave a link in the description box for that as well, or you can just click on it right on my channel page. And I hope you have a great day.